Hi everybody, it's Olivia Ray, and in this video, we're talking about how to know if you're psychic. Can everyone read energy? What does clairvoyant even mean? So I hope you enjoy.
So we're here today to talk about clairvoyance and what that means and who is clairvoyant. And maybe we can even talk a little bit about how to know if you're clairvoyant. So I really see clairvoyance as like simply, and it's hilarious if you look clairvoyance up on if you like Google what clairvoyance means, it's like supposedly clairvoyance is blah 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 blah. So I don't really go based on that definition. My definition of clairvoyance is just the ability to see energy in the center of your head, in this space behind your eyes. How do you define clairvoyance? Probably pretty similar.
Yeah, I think that seeing energy, experiencing energy outside of, the normal senses is the way that I would describe clairvoyance. There's just so many different clairs. You can really see energy, you could feel energy, you could smell energy, you could hear energy. My cat is meowing. You guys aren't imagining that.
Yeah, we'll probably get a few meows from my cat at some point too. Shadow, would you like to chime in? Nope. Nope. Just tail wags for now. Something that comes up for me as we talk about this is, you know, probably for the first year of my clairvoyant training, I couldn't really see anything, or I thought I wasn't seeing anything. And now that I'm much further along in my journey, I realized that I was just looking at a limitation. Did you have that experience? Or I feel like you had more of an experience of like being very, like having a very vivid experience of seeing as soon as you learned how to see.
Well, my experience going back a little ways was I had seen a lot of stuff growing up, and the way that I managed that was I was diagnosed as depressed. And so I was put on antidepressants. The antidepressants worked kind of
Mhm.
as a stopper, and
Totally.
put up this kind of energetic wall around my ability to see, sense, and feel all of that stimuli. And when I came off of my antidepressants, all of a sudden it was like, bam, I was
Mm.
seeing stuff and I was like, oh my God, I'm crazy. I could see all this stuff happening. What is going on? So, for me, when I first started my training, I was able to see quite a bit, but I did go through periods of time where I would hit limits or invalidation around my ability to see. And so I'd
Mhm.
go from seeing very vividly with my eyes open or closed in meditation
Mm.
to a space where everything was just dark. And it ended
Mm.
up being a lot of different energies that I cleared through around invalidation and around that fear of seeing that really ultimately cleared that for me.
Yeah, I think I still hit limitations on my ability to see. And sometimes, I'll feel like I'm just kind of guessing, but then the information that comes through is so accurate that it really helps clear out and release that invalidation around my ability to see. For me, when I started the training, I would say, going back to, you mentioned there's all the different clairs, which is just the different psychic senses. When I first started my training, my clairsentience was definitely my strongest ability. And that's really how I knew that I wanted to do something like intuitive training is I would feel things so strongly. And I still do. I didn't shut that off. I just know how to work with it more. And I would say in the capacity of like my professional work, I do shut that off. And that's part of what the training does is helps you kind of turn that down. I think it was a really big breakthrough for me in realizing that, our clear sentience, our ability to feel psychically is often uh, like covered in many, many layers of programming. And what I mean by that is when you're feeling psychically, a lot of the time, it's not completely accurate. So I think that's really like the power of developing something like your ability to see energy, because when you see it, it's a lot harder to get confused. Do you feel like that's an accurate way to describe that? Like why it's important when you're so intuitively gifted naturally So you're feeling a lot of shit. We could describe this as like being an empath. You're laughing at my air quotes.
I really actually agree with that, because there's so many different things out there in the world right now that say things like, if you're triggered, follow your gut, listen to what your body is telling you. And a lot of times that's different levels of energy that is needing to be worked out. Or if you feel triggered, it means this. Avoid people that make you feel like this, avoid situations that make you feel like that. And that can't really be 100% trusted, because a lot of times what's getting lit up and triggered in your space is some type of energy that needs to be resolved. It's not necessarily a read per se. And you can't really know that when you're out there in the world and you're having all of these negative triggers and experiences and not seeing the energy behind it. Because where you might feel like, for me, my experience with this was I really felt like I couldn't trust people. Everybody that I met, I had this feeling like, oh, there's something else. There's something else there. It's not all on the surface. This is very Scorpio of me again. Like, something else is going on. What is that? I don't believe you. Like, I just really had this like mistrust, and that was really an energy within me that needed to be resolved around a trust wound. It didn't mean that everybody in the world was not trustworthy. It meant that I was getting lit up and triggered around a trust wound. But until I was able to see that, I just thought I needed to stay away from everybody. I can do this all on my own, everybody. I want to just be by myself in the woods in a little hovel with my cauldron and leave me alone, right?
And I think the value of going through something like an intuitive training is there are so many dimensions to what you're describing, which, you know, those dimensions could be past lives, they could be alternate timelines, it could be karma, it could be ancestral generational trauma. And until you really sit and learn to look at that and see how you relate to that on your own, you just can't find it. Can you hear Shadow?
Shadow's like, I found it. It's right here.
Yeah, it's hard to define it, I think is what I'm trying to say. It's harder to define it. That was really the value, or one of the many values for me in intuitive training, is being able to understand how I perceived that type of energy, how I saw a past life, so that when I would have those experiences in the world, I would be like, oh, that doesn't look like something that's in present time. It looks like something that's a past life.
I think that makes so much sense, because there's so many people out there that are reading from their emotional clear ability, which is clairsentience, and they're just feeling a bunch of stuff about other people, and it's being brought in through that lens and that filter of past experience. And a lot of times it's pain. So
Yeah.
in my example, it was this pain energy that everything was being filtered through. And I thought that that was my like awesome psychic sense. Like I could tell that everybody's full of shit, when really it was just kind of exacerbating like this issue that like really just needed to be addressed.
And you know, I love these conversations because I think we have such a spectrum of experience with our psychic development. Because for me, what that often looked like was trusting people way too much. My psychic abilities, oops, my ring light's dead. My psychic abilities, or my clairsentience really looked like, oh, everyone's, you know, seeing the best in everyone, and just like giving away my power to everyone that I met, thinking that everyone was my friend, because like my ability to really have that discernment was pretty messed up based on the life that I had lived, and I'm sure there were past lives involved in that. So in owning my ability to see energy, I've really stepped out of the dynamic with people where I just like trust every single person that comes into my life, and I have a lot more energy for myself now.
I actually did that first. I actually did that
Interesting.
first. Growing up, I was very open. I was very,
Mm-hmm.
trusted everybody, took everybody at face value. Anything that anybody said, I just took it as the truth. And that built up that pain around betrayal and about around trust. And then
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden it was like a light switch. And that's really where, you know, you can go back and find all of those instances where there's a bunch of energy that's built up, and then resolve that energy, look at it, address it, and then all of a sudden you don't have to be experiencing the world through that lens anymore. You don't have to avoid being out in public. You don't have to be drained because you're giving everybody your energy.
And I think you also stop attracting those relationships that are trying to get you to work through those energies.
Time.
So one thing that I really wanted to address, because I think this is a big topic for people, is the conversation of, can everyone read energy?
Yes, absolutely. I was just on this podcast interview where I was talking to this woman who was asking me about, teaching clairvoyance and psychic abilities. And she went in on saying that not everybody can see. And I was confused because I've never worked with somebody that wasn't able to work through the energy or the invalidation or the blockages around being able to see, whether that's with your eyes open or closed. And I think that there's, kind of a misconception in the world that there's some people that are like chosen and they're born into it, and they have this lineage of these people that are so psychic and they come in the world and they just have it. And maybe some people more so than others, but being psychic is really a skill. It's a muscle. And when you start to use your third eye, when you start to use your clairvoyance and really develop that skill, it's like a muscle. You have to build up that muscle and practice and, look at energy and move through some of that invalidation in order to really get to the point where you're an athlete, really, with your sixth chakra. You're like doing all these sort of acrobatic flips and stuff at some point, right? Like we are now. And
Sing through all the dimensions and
right. And it's more so you have to really be able to sit and figure out, what do I have to do in order to develop that skill? And a lot of it's meditation, right? A lot of it's sitting there and meditating and looking at energy and practicing and getting lit up and noticing what's coming up and noticing the invalidation. And from that process, you continue to kind of, open that doorway.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And, I think a huge value, and this is really what we're offering, is having people who have been there to hold the space for you as you learn to work at that energy and look at that energy and move that energy that keeps you from seeing. Because if you think you can't see, you're literally just looking at the energy that's telling you that you can't see. I think my experience is a really good example. Before I went through intuitive training, I had no idea that I was psychic. And now that I know, my whole life makes sense. Many of the things that I was experiencing throughout my life, one of them being just incredibly malleable in all of the experiences that I had as a human, like just like becoming whoever I spent the most time around. That's a psychic ability, and I didn't know that before I went through intuitive training and learned to develop my skills. And again, being able to see clairvoyantly really helps you have that discernment to know what is and is not for you. Because for me personally, I don't think anything is bad. I think it's all just a part of the human experience. And I know that's a controversial thing to say. And of course, there are bad things that happen in this world, but energetically, the energies that we get stuck on are not bad. It's just a matter of being able to sit with them enough. And this is really like where we could even get into the conversation of shadow work. Like, how present can you be with the parts of yourself that you don't want to look at, so you can move out that energy that limits you from being able to see what's true for you?
Absolutely. I think that for a lot of people that experience an abrupt spiritual awakening where all of a sudden
Totally.
ability is turned on and they've been going through their life really, in one direction, thinking that the world's very physical, and all of a sudden they're seeing and experiencing spirit, that can be a very scary experience. And
Yeah.
like I was talking about earlier, having that kind of abrupt realization that everything I'd experienced as a child was actually real and that it wasn't my imagination. It was actually
Yeah.
very ungrounding and very scary for me at first,
Yeah.
because of what I was experiencing and how vivid it was and how much I was like really in a sensation of full body panic. And there's so many people that I've worked with that go through those experiences, and You know, the body itself can get lit up and triggered around these experiences, but there's nothing inherently bad or scary or dark about being able to see energy. It's really just our own perceptions of what we're seeing and our body's reactions to what we're seeing. So it turned out a lot of the energies that I was reacting to were actually just energies that wanted me to say hello, that wanted to be acknowledged, that wanted to be seen, and they knew that I could see them. And so, you know, my experience was, oh my God, there's this stuff in my room and it's touching me, and you know, there's a lot of people that I worked with that have had similar experiences where they come in and they're like, Melanie, how do I turn it off? Same way you turn it on, you have to practice. And once you're able to really own your sixth sense and own your ability to use your third eye and your clairvoyance, you don't have to go through the world seeing and experiencing everything all the time. You don't have to talk to spirit 24/7.
Totally.
In line at the grocery store talking to somebody's dead grandma.
No, because you have
You can,
boundaries.
right, you have boundaries, and you can energetically tell them no. And if you don't want to be seeing all that stuff, especially when you're driving, which can be very distracting, you can turn that ability off and close that for yourself.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, for people who are kind of skeptical of this type of work, that would be one of the number one questions that I get asked is like, well, what do you see in, like, what do you see for me right now? And I'm like, I'm not looking. You're not paying me. Like, I have trained for years to own this ability so that I can go into that space when I want to, and I can be a human when I want to. And it's both. But one thing that I really want to say around, you know, the sixth sense and the question of is everyone psychic is I believe that before technology, this ability to see energy was part of our human technology. We are innately sensitive as humans, and in our world today, what seeing energy often looks like is someone being very sensitive, but that is a natural part of being human. Most of us have just evolved to turn off our sensitivities in order to be able to survive in this world, because it's a really overwhelming world. We're constantly inundated with sensation and input, sensory input, and if you don't know how to manage that, it often is easier to just shut it off. But I do believe that everyone has the ability to see energy, and that has been my experience in working with many, many, many people, is that it is an ability, and it's like you said, it's a muscle that can be developed. One more thing I want to say, just like going off of what you were just saying, is, you know, I've had people come to me before and they're like, well, I see demons. And I'm like, well, why don't we look at the energy that's telling you that that's a demon? And then they're like, oh, it's just my younger self. You know, so we often will paint these energies that we don't want to look at in these negative images that, I mean, we're not going to go here, but a lot of the time have been put into our space by things like media and entertainment, in religion, because those industries want to disempower this ability, because when you have this ability, you have a lot of discernment, and you don't need to give your power away to those establishments. I got myself off on a tangent here. But, you know, the point being, the point being that often that fear that comes in that says, well, I'm going to see demons or monsters or whatever, it's really just the fear that you have of being with yourself. And that's what something like intuitive training can offer, is the ability to really like become radically present with yourself, so that everything that happens in your life is valuable and has meaning, and so that your whole life becomes that spiritual journey. I just did a TikTok about this, saying, you know, it's not a matter of having a spiritual practice. Your life already is the spiritual practice. Can you own that as that space? And for me, that is what has made my life incredibly fulfilling and enriching.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that seeing energies that you perceive as dark or evil or scary a lot of times is a personification or a projection of something that you're not ready to face. So for me, it was, when I started seeing stuff all of a sudden, it was that feeling of being a child and being really helpless that was being projected onto the energies that were wanting to communicate with me. And so I was seeing scary monsters, and they were seeing somebody who was bright and shiny that they wanted to say hi to and they wanted to talk to. And I was like, oh my God, but it ended up being a lens and a filter around what I was experiencing. And oftentimes it is with many people. And with the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that I've worked with, I've never seen something in somebody's space that I was like, call in the priest,
Yeah.
an exorcism, you know what I mean? It's just never been anything that has been like that. But in our society, there's such a charge around polarities and around light and dark and good and evil, and this like battle against them. And really the stuff that we push away and we don't want to own and we don't want to face, we label as bad and evil. And the things that we see as good, it's love and light and all this other stuff, but there can't be one without the other. And so this maybe dark part of whatever it is something that you're maybe not ready to face. It's unconscious, it's a pain, it's a fear, and it's not necessarily something that's bad or out to get you, even though it can feel that way sometimes. It can definitely feel that way.
And I would say in my experience with seeing how energy works, the more that you resist that painful, shadowy, dark part, the more that it's going to show up in the spiritual practice that is your life, the more that people are going to show up and just mirror that right back to you. And, in the beginning of my practice, I worked a lot with animals because that felt safer than humans. And I would see that the animals that would come to me were mirroring these parts of that the humans didn't want to see within themselves. So if you don't look at it, something in your life is going to find a way to show it to you. And intuitive training is such an amazing way to really start to own that mirror that's already being shown to you as something that you can make value of and also find empowerment in.
Totally. Going back to kind of inherent intuitive gifts, and I know you're saying you believe that everybody is psychic. I also believe that. I believe that we all have the ability to see energy. We all have the ability to heal energy, and we all have the ability to shift our reality. And I think what's so important about psychic training and about intuitive development and about using your third eye is that once you start to see energy, you start to own and create your reality. And it's very empowering because you're no longer being affected by energy. The world is not being created by you being affected in the world by news, by people, by other people's emotions, by stress, by what's being put on you. It's just you see it, you acknowledge it, you move it out of your energetic space, you're aware of what's going on. And it's kind of what's going on behind the curtain a lot of times because we're so wrapped up in the physical, that part isn't as real. The energy isn't as real. But the reality of our reality is that everything is energy. Yeah. So if you learn how to see energy and you learn how to work with energy, you learn how to create in the world. You are the person who affects energy. And it's such a powerful tool to have for that reason.
Yeah, and I think I'm just going to repeat you here, but
it.
It really is, having that ability to really see the energy and acknowledge how it impacts you is what also gives you the ability to decide what you want. And I think that's really the power and the value of this work. And sometimes it's uncomfortable to see and acknowledge the way that things impact you and to really own that impact and to really recognize maybe how you have been the effect of life before. But once you own that and once you see that, you can't unsee it. It's like whatever pill in the matrix wakes you up,
I'm going to do a matrix analogy too. I'm like, essentially what's going on behind the curtain after you take the pill that wakes you up. It's you're becoming aware of energy and you're the person who is in the driver's seat in life instead of being the effect of life.
Yeah. And you have to take that step in order to truly become someone who can create your reality. Because if you don't know how you're being impacted, it's very hard to make the choices moment to moment that are going to get your needs met.
So I'm just smiling because I'm like, this is the part where we offer them the red pill.
Is it the red pill?
I think it is. The red one wakes you up, the blue one puts you back. So if you want to learn how to see energy and own your sensitivity and be in the world in a way where you are the creator and you are affecting the world and you're not becoming everything around you, but you're creating everything around you, take the red pill.
And join Awakening Sanctuary.
Join Awakening Sanctuary. We teach you how to own and really access the skill and build that muscle.
Yeah. And you can come to our open house on March 26th. I'm going to keep saying the day after my birthday. Come celebrate my birthday weekend with me and us, and get a free healing and learn more about what we're going to be teaching you in this training.
We'd love to see you there with all of our eyes.
Beautiful.